would be no reason to have money. You would just give consumers some vouchers. You pay them in vouchers, and they would go to the stores and they would buy whatever was produced. Okay? But there'd be no way to allocate all the resources. Take the American economy, for example. We have millions of different types of resources. How do you allocate them? How do you decide of all the infinite ways that we can use these resources to produce different goods with different technologies? How do you decide which of all of those ways are the most efficient? You cannot do it without prices. Now, that's all very abstract. Let me just give you an example of that. Very simple decision that a socialist planner could not make. Now, the problem is not scientific knowledge under socialism. They could hire scientists and engineers who would always give them the various technological ways of producing goods. So let's say they come up with this way, and forget about my writing in blue there, my scribbling. Just focus on the production of an automobile. Okay? So the engineer could tell the central planner that if you want to produce a particular automobile, you need P tons of steel, Q hours of machine time, R hours of unskilled labor, some hours of engineering labor, a quantity of factory space, certain kilowatt hours of electricity, and finally managerial labor. You add all those together and you get one. You combine them in the production process and you get one automobile. Okay? The question isn't whether socialism can produce a car. It's whether they know if they should produce a car or not, and if they do decide to produce a car, what's the cheapest way of producing a car? Okay? What's the cost of production of producing that automobile? Can we add up tons of steel, hours of machine time, hours of unskilled labor, so on and so forth, and get a unitary figure? Of course not, because you can't add apples and oranges. Okay? So the socialist would not know whether or not he should set up a factory to produce 100,000 cars per year. He would not know if the steel, the machine time, the engineering labor was better used in producing bicycles or motorcycles or building more houses for the comrades. He couldn't make his mind. He wouldn't know whether or not it was profitable or useful to build another automobile or another automobile factory, let's say. Okay? Now, there's another problem, a technological problem. We know today that you can build an automobile by hand, as was done up until about 1910, where one or a small group of craftsmen in a small bicycle shop, that's where the first automobiles were built, should get together and make all the parts themselves and then assemble the one automobile, and, each, okay, or together, assemble one automobile. Or whether we should produce like we produce today, where we have a labor and capital, or if we should produce, as the Japanese are doing in many plants, with a completely robotized factory, a factory that's run by robots, and there's a few people who control the computers. So you have, in other words, should we have more machines? That is, should we add to the Q hours A hours of machine time and make the factory almost completely robotically run, and therefore decrease the amount of labor? Is that a more efficient way of building automobiles? They don't know. They don't know if the costs go up or down when they do that. Okay? You can always substitute more machines for labor and get the same amount of automobiles. Or should we go to make automobiles by hand, pretty much, without much capital, as we did in the 1890s? They would never know the correct answer there. Do we know that answer under capitalism? Of course we do. Because steel is privately owned, machines are privately owned, factory spaces are privately owned, electricity is privately owned. It's all traded on markets. So now we can look at the bottom there. If in fact it costs, if the entrepreneur has to bid against all the other entrepreneurs that are producing all the other things in the economy, $18,000 to get all of those resources and combine them, and if he expects to get $21,000 for the automobile, then in fact we know that's an efficient decision. Why? Because those various resources are worth about $18,000 in producing other things in the economy. All other things, the next best uses in the economy are worth $18,000 to consumers. That's why the other entrepreneurs will only bid up to $18,000. And that's why he can basically get those resources for $18,000. Now what is he doing with them? He's taking those resources, he's combining them, and then he's producing a product that's worth $21,000 to consumers. So what is he doing? He's allocating resources, moving them from lower valued uses to higher valued uses. Okay. To take a more radical example, a number of years ago there was the phenomenon of the pet rock. I think it was in the 1980s or something like that. Does anyone remember that? There was a kid who became a millionaire by coming up with the idea of a pet that wasn't messy, that didn't need to be taken out all the time, that didn't bother you when you didn't want to be bothered. It was a rock. Okay, a rock that he picked up off the ground. Other people saw no value in that rock. He saw a $10 pet. So, with his marketing costs and so on, he sold these, let's say, at $2. I don't remember the price. Rather, his costs were $2, and let's say he sold them for $10. He made an $8 profit. What did he do? He took resources worth $2. He combined them into a product that was worth $10. Now, what if entrepreneurs make mistakes, as Ford has? I mentioned yesterday that Ford lost $8.6 billion last quarter. What does that imply? It implies that they took resources, let's say, now we'll use red to show the losses. Ford paid, let's say, $22,000 per SUV, and let's make it more, let's say $32,000 per SUV, and sold them for $28,000. Okay? So this is the cost of production. This is the price. Ford made a mistake. Okay? That is, Ford used resources that were worth $32,000 to consumers. They had a bid for these resources in markets, and they sold them at $28,000, which means that consumers did not value the car as urgently as the other things that could have been produced by those resources. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean that they're irrational in some sense, that they're not able to calculate? No. In all systems, we always have uncertainty. Now, when you build a car, you are making a decision 5 years in advance. It generally takes 5 years to bring a model from the drawing board to the dealer's showroom. So to make a long story short, even when entrepreneurs make wrong decisions under capitalism, they know they've made wrong decisions. Now, what is Ford doing? It's feverishly shutting down factories in the U.S., getting rid of labor and releasing steel and everything else in those areas of SUVs and trucks and so on, where the value is less than the cost of production. So the point is that they immediately begin adjusting in a way that's dictated by consumer demand. Now, is there any way for the socialist planner to know whether or not they're making a mistake? No, they don't know. Okay, it's without the cost of production, there's no way to know. Now, I have a friend that I grew up with, this woman, who lives in Montana. I like to give this example. A number of years ago, she lives on a big ranch. She married a cowboy, a real cowboy. They actually have cattle, and they have cattle drives and everything. But in any case, so she lives on a big ranch in Montana. You know, there's about 15 people in Montana. And so one day she says, I just bought a new house. He said, oh, you moved from the ranch? And she says, no. She says, I traded in the old house. I said, what are you talking about? She said, well, out here, houses are built modularly in factories in Nebraska. She said they just took apart the old house and they brought in pieces by railroad and by truck, and they put them together. They assembled them here in Montana. Now, why would they do that? Certainly, from where I come from in the Northeast, all houses are built on site, right? Why? Because in the Northeast, there's a lot of labor. The labor can be easily transported. It's very densely populated. Labor can easily be transported to the spot where the houses have to be built. Okay? So it's cheaper to do it that way. However, in Montana, it's cheaper to build houses with a lot of machinery in big factories at a great distance, and then to incur the cost of transportation, and then to use a little bit of labor, because there's hardly anybody in Montana use some local labor to simply put them together. Okay? Now, could a socialist planner ever in his wildest dreams figure that out? No. How did the entrepreneurs that built the modular housing factory in Nebraska figure that out? They figured that out by looking at costs and prices, what the expected prices are. Now, no one ever knows exactly what prices and revenues they're going to get. Okay? But they can always look at the market and see the costs of producing. And if they feel, believe, expect, anticipate that the prices of what they're going to be selling is higher than the cost of production, they will then engage